Hello.
Hi.
Are you just a citizen or?
Yes, is this the Parks?
It is.
Okay, yes.
Great.
I'm Thomaston resident.
Wonderful. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
We're waiting for a member who's just finished another meeting and is on her way, and she takes the minutes. So,
Okay.
have you heard from Jameson?
I have not. Russell, did you say she was wrapping up her speech? It is the board's pleasure. You guys can wait or go ahead and start and allow her to attend late. It's up to you guys.
Well, we just heard that Robert's Rules of Order says you have to have some, well, you could take the minutes until she came, I guess.
Right.
Is that proper? Okay, great.
since Jerry is on the phone, is he counted as,
You have to have a physical quorum in the room with the new open meetings law.
But I would think with a medical excuse, it would be,
Or out of jurisdiction. So yeah, let's see.
I would think,
There's 8 members, so we actually really do need to wait for Jameson to arrive. Just so we have a physical quorum. So they just updated the open meetings act and laws.
How would you define quorum without bylaws?
If there are no bylaws,
Good point.
It's majority.
Robert's Rules of Order, I
if-
guess.
the bylaws can state what a quorum is. If you have them, if you don't, a quorum, you have to exceed 50% of the members.
So we need her to, out of the 8 members. But they just updated the public meetings law to state that you have to have a physical quorum before someone can Zoom or phone into a meeting. And then they're only allowed to do it twice a year under a medical, issue, or if they're out of the district.
So this would qualify as a
Right,
medical.
we still need to have Ms. Jameson.
Right.
Problem
Oh,
solved.
good, problem solved. Did you know how important you are, Jameson?
You are.
Very.
agree with that. Oh, sorry.
You want to sit over here because Jerry's here. It might be easier for you to,
Thank you for letting me know.
well, thank you for,
With us, please, sir.
can you get through?
Yes.
Got your packet and everything here.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, we will officially call the meeting to order. And I would like to start out by saying, I think everyone knows someone is missing today. The last time we met, Gary sat right there. Gary Self served very wonderfully on this committee, very active, gave a lot of thought to whatever the discussion was, brought a lot to the table, and he will be missed. And I thought we would just pause for a moment in silence to think about Gary. Thank you. If anyone wanted to say anything about Gary, and please do.
I'd say something. Gary used to live in the city and was always present at the city meetings, and then he moved to the county and was almost always present at those county meetings. And one thing I'd say about Gary is he was always interested in what was going on in his community, always involved, always had the facts. And if he had an opinion, he almost always was wanting to show it. But one thing there was a number of things that we disagreed on. He would come talk, but he was always super respectful and always did it in just the right way. And, I really loved the fact that he was a citizen that came informed and came thinking what he wanted the community to be like. And so in the end, I think Thomaston and Upson County has lost a great voice. A voice of the people and a voice of those who thought like him. And I've always appreciated how he did things. And but when he differed on opinion, he was always super respectful, and he was very strong in his opinions and how he thought things would be. But he appreciated people in government, and he really he showed that appreciation by the way he did things. He was in many ways an ideal citizen in that he was informed. Sometimes people will complain about something, but they're not so informed. He always came informed, and he knew exactly what was going on. So I really appreciated him, and sorry he's no longer here, and sorry that our community's lost somebody like him that was a real voice.
I agree. And he certainly made contributions to this committee, and he was just so looking forward to the memorial. He loved the park. He was so looking forward to finally having a memorial, and it's just sad to me that he won't be able to see that. But, well, thank you. I appreciate those remarks. Okay, and thank you to the city for your cooperation in setting this up. I know so much is going on in the city, and it took a good bit of juggling, and Oasis really outdid herself in setting it up and organizing this material. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
You have received the minutes in your packet and on the internet. And are there any corrections that need to be made to the minutes or additions? Has everyone had a chance to read them? Then they will stand approved as written. Thank you. I will comment that
Ideally, we would have a first, second motion and then a vote.
Okay. Sometimes
So
we
I'll
do
make
and
a-
sometimes we don't. Okay,
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
thank you. A
Second.
Okay. Wait a double second. Okay, all in favor? Jerry, are you with us? Thank you. I just want to comment on the minutes. You notice the first person asking a question was Gary Self.
Absolutely.
And a very good one. Okay. Today we are here to discuss a resolution that has been sent to you. And I will, Jerry, have you had a chance to hear the resolution?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I will quickly review it and then we'll open it up for discussion. The Greatest Generation Memorial Park Committee resolution to the members, to the mayor and council of the city of Thomaston, Georgia. Whereas the members of this committee are advised that the mayor and council of the city of Thomaston now has before it for consideration a new zoning ordinance for the city, which will significantly revise the zoning classifications and regulations for properties located within the geographical limits of the city. And whereas the members of the committee are concerned with the preservation of the parks and recreational properties within said city and have concluded that as part of the revised zoning classification, it would be significantly beneficial for the governing authority of the city to now recognize and designate a special zoning classification for the public parks and recreational areas of the city, so as to assure the preservation of the heritage of our community as presented by its parks and recreational areas, and to be certain that all citizenry of the city will be able in the future to continue to utilize and enjoy our community playgrounds, walkways, picnic areas, together with our other recreational facilities, while honoring those individuals who have given so much to this community, our state, and our nation. Now therefore be it resolved, and it hereby is, that the members of the Greatest Generation Memorial Park Committee, in order to enhance and preserve the many public benefits to the community now afforded by the parks and recreational public areas within the city of Thomaston, do hereby request and solicit of the mayor and council of the city of Thomaston, Georgia, that in the adoption of the 2022 zoning ordinance for the city, there be specifically included a uniquely designated zoning classification for the public parks and recreational properties of the city, providing therein regulations to ensure that all the public benefits now afforded to the citizenry of this community by all such properties shall continue unimpaired and unabated. And I would like to just make a couple of comments, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion. Yeah, I think we all agree that zoning is important for a community, and the city council is to be commended for undertaking this very difficult, and there's so many facets to it. I understand that. And for protection. People need it for protection also. And we also understand from the very beginning that the city has the right to change any of the zoning at any time. So we can kind of set that aside now. I think those are agreeables, and we understand them. I don't think anybody here could misunderstand that. So the purpose today is to discuss the value of having a parks and recreation classification within the zoning and ordinances. And I don't know who would like to open this up for discussion and even for clarification if there is a problem in providing a parks and recreation classification. And
Okay, one question, and let me just say, I think that Greatest Generation Park, all of our parks, but in particular the Greatest Generation Park, for which the Hightower family has provided a huge portion of the funds that have been done to do that, and it's just is an incredible gift and part of our community. One of the best things, if I sort of classify it as a non-governmental thing, it is part of it, but just one of the best things that's ever been done here. And so I really do want to make sure that it gets preserved and done, just like, Weaver Park and other parks. But I think that has added so much to us. But I guess I wonder, and the thoughts of this resolution, I certainly say that's awesome. But I wonder, I think it maybe, in the revised maybe an R1 or R2. But before, I think it may have been in the governmental. And I wonder, I kind of feel like wouldn't be under governmental, wouldn't it have been as adequately protected? You've already said, you can't sort of say this is going to be like this forever. I would like to think not only would it be like that for ever and ever, but even better
Right.
over time, and that's our hope. But I don't know, I guess I wonder, if I go back and think, I would sort of say, well, why not put it under that governmental thing? Because in essence, that seems to best fit it. I know if there was if there was Parks and Recreation, I don't know, would it gain any protection that isn't provided under governmental? And I don't know, Russell, you're far more knowledgeable of it as far as being able to protect anything. I mean, we said, it can change, but the governmental seem to say, hey, these are assets that are basically owned by the government and for a governmental purpose for the people.
I guess in simplistic terms, so zoning is a designation that regulates land use. So if we put a regulation on a particular land use for property that's held by the public, be the government, who are we protecting the land against?
Well, I guess you're protecting the land against anyone from, well, let's just put it out there. Let's say a developer comes to town and says, that's a permitted area which is open to all of these possibilities. And I would like to carve out a little spot in there for some kind of professional building or, whatever it be. So I think in just having a classification, are we going to call a park a park? And Russell, we started off with the emailing, and we both agreed it was in P1. Russell put it back in R1, which is better than P1 for this one park. And we're talking about all the parks to be consistent. Weaver Park, Lakeside Park, and Greatest Generation. So if you had, and I told Russell I was going on the internet to learn as much as I could about parks and recreation and how they were treated by various towns and cities, and it's interesting. I mean, it's a unique classification, but I did run across just in one reference. It says, well, let's just review what zoning classifications there could be. You've got residential, business, industrial, agricultural, institutional, open space, mixed use, planned unit development, and historic. Those are possibilities for classification. And I think there are various ways you can classify these. But it seems like it would be helpful to the general public if they see a zoning map that, and Russell, this is where we got bogged down, was on the land use. And we know zoning is different from land use. But how do you pull those together so the citizen, in looking at a map, or if you put it that green color, that aqua green, and lump it under all these other things, it's confusing. And that, here we have not that many classifications until you start breaking them down into different residential, different multi-use and all that. I understand that. But to make it clear to the public, I think institutional, a lot of people think of institutions as being a building, a structure, not typically open space. So, you know, I've lived in Georgia for a long time. I grew up in Toccoa, northeast Georgia. I have seen what has happened with development in communities. And that's why it's important for us to be having this discussion today. Because you can always put it on the back burner. You can always hide it within a classification. And then you're going to get into trouble if the community doesn't value open space. And how much open space is there today? Think about it. Where do people go? You know, I was just curious in Weaver Park. I learned today, Jameson did the lookup, and Weaver Park started in 1929. Interestingly, it was from a donation and purchase. Does that sound familiar? Greatest Generation, donation, purchase. It was named, it was 2 newspaper articles, I believe. The September, it was discussed, it said that the park was donated by the Weaver and the estate, both from the estate, was given to the city. Then 2 months later, September, October, November, the Kiwanis Club named the park. It was a city park. I don't know exactly the ramifications there, but they somehow were working together. That Weaver Park was named by the Kiwanis Club, and they were collecting donations for the equipment in the park. Now that's 1929. The Depression, part of our history. And we're learning so much now about, more is being discussed about the Depression and World War II. And let's hope we don't get into a World War III. But anyway, I'm trying to get the head around how do we show to the citizen that is it not simple to name, or just name it on the map. Put in there the name of the park, Lakeside Park, Weaver Park, Greatest Generation Memorial Park. Some or a color, a new color. And I noticed with in Forsyth County, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Forsyth County, high growth, rapid growth, unexpected growth. And interestingly, Keith Banky is on their planning, and I don't know if it's zoning, planning, overall planning of Forsyth County. Now, Keith Banky was the real estate person for Martha Mill, selling the Martha Mills property. And I remember 3 years ago when all of this started up about the park and selling and deeding and all of that business. I said, well, Keith, what do you do up there in Forsyth County? I said, you know, that is such a high growth area. He said, we are desperate for green space. Now, see, I would hate for that to happen. You know, I think we're in the vicinity of Atlanta, Macon, Columbus. I think we need to prepare for what this could mean, and that's why valuing open space would be so wonderful to show somehow. I don't know how. I don't know how to put it on the classification or the ordinance. I did notice that in Forsyth County, where Canton is, they have in the ordinances, the way they handled it was uses, how the parks were used. But there's some obvious way to show either on the internet or on your zoning, but I think to be prepared on that zoning will be important for saving the parks. And you know, Russell, maybe you have a good idea about how it could be incorporated. It's just showing the public that it is what it is. It is a park. We understand that times change, and down the road something might have to change. But is it important now in the near future?
What if you left it unzoned? Just park.
You could do that. I think it gives it more teeth if it's within a listing, a classification, and an ordinance.
Well, that gets back to the question about the regulatory effect of the land use. So we've established that you can't bind elected bodies and their successors and all.
But that's true of all of it, Russell.
Right. So if the intent is to protect it from developers, developers would first have to acquire the property through the public.
But why can't you be up front and say that the community, in showing somehow that it's a special place in the community, especially at this point in time, and ward all, there's plenty of other places they can go for development. But I think this is, as I said, we can kick it down the road in hopes for the best, or we can say this is what we really value in this community, and it's going to make this community a better place long run.
So to keep it in simple terms, any park designated on the map, if a developer comes in and says, oh, that's an ideal place for, it's a park.
Yeah, but they could always rezone it. So my point is, if the city wanted the development to happen, they're gonna rezone the property anyway.
But it's clearer to the public. It's a more definite. You're trying to offer some protection.
I guess my point is, it's very clear to this public, and it's very clear to this council. But it may not be clear 20 years from now, when there's a whole different group of parks people and a whole different group of elected officials. My point is, you shouldn't create a precedent of binding future generations.
They always have the right to change that. And I cannot imagine anybody thinking that they couldn't.
They may not.
Well,
Could be. It's HISA park there forever. Mine was more from a legal aspect. I get the intent. It's a park, everybody wants it to be a park.
Yeah, but I have seen this in a legal, the different classifications of what could be designated zones.
To create a land use and call it parks, right?
Mhm.
So then we need to focus on the regulations and who are the regulations against, since the public owns it. Are we regulating?
Well, you have regulations onto the use of the park. How do you want the park, I mean, you already have that done somewhat, you know, you've got rules, regulations. It would just be and then whoever is interested in the park can go online, and you could even put it in the search bar, park and recreation ordinances.
Yeah.
And it'll pop up, and you could, that's the wonder of the internet.
So you regulate it via ordinance,
Yeah,
not by zoning.
right,
We're talking about zoning.
right. Well, to me, they could go hand in hand. I think they could go hand in hand.
You could write them into the land use, so maybe let's talk about what some of those regulations would be. So if we have a parks designation of zoning, right? Weaver, Lakeside, Greatest Generation. So if we create that land use and it shows up on a map and we create a color and we tag it, I have to have a whole section in the land use about permittable uses. So what do those need to be?
Well, you would have to be specific to how you want the parks run.
Can I say something?
Yes.
The permittable uses, that's an excellent opportunity to protect the open spaces. Because number one, we know development's coming, whether it's what we're seeing now or just the fact that cities are exploding.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you can't take back open space. Because once someone gets their hands on it, it's never coming back.
Exactly.
So it's more important that we protect as much as we can, as hard as we can now, because we could always give it up later. And once you do these, what did you call them, permitted uses, that's where the protection is, because the permitted use is just for open space, you know, just for a soccer field, just for a dog park, just for, you know, whatever it is. And you're right, the city can change what it likes when it likes, but once it's designated this way, it would require additional steps of involving the public. So now the public can come in and defend their open spaces.
Okay, very good point. And this is where we started with the park, with the P1. But I will say this, once you put it into that P1, there's a whole host of things. It's how it's written, right? I mean, you've got to have it spelled out within those permitted spaces what that park could be used for, or what its boundaries are. But if you think about it, that park on the highway, you know, it's remarkable that we have such a wonderful park like that on the highway. Even the Georgia Department of Transportation knows that roadside parks, they have a grant, the Transportation Enhancement, they're really reimbursements, to promote nice aesthetic areas, natural resources,
I want
parks.
more parks. That's why I came here.
Yeah, right, I know.
Designate the whole area as
Yeah,
a
but
park.
it's hard to keep it. This is what bothers me. It's, and I'm trying here, you're saying that the permitted would give it that protection.
Well, I don't know. I mean, from what I'm hearing, I'm thinking that that's one more step, one more barrier that someone would have to go through to take over the land. And the more barriers we have, the better, because it'll allow more opportunities to protect the open spaces. I
no.
just,
Yeah, I thank you. I appreciate your remarks. And listen, we're all in it together and we want the same thing.
yeah.
So if we can just get to the best way to do this, and I'm a novice at this, I just know I have seen more land. Oh my gosh, you drive up some of these interstates and it's just a disaster. I mean, it is just visual.
I lived it in Fayetteville
Yeah,
when I was a kid. I mean, Fayetteville was just so open, and we had Christmas tree farms, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you turn, you know, there's buildings here, buildings there, and I think we were left with 2 puny little parks, and that was it.
this is the concern. I
remember when this council was entertaining the thought of putting the Lakeside Park in over here, and y'all had the city attorney render an opinion to you over the power of council's ability to form parks, and it was very, he came back with like 3 things that cities can do, and like parks, forming parks was one of the highest things they had in their list, guaranteed by the state legislature, by their charter. And I would assume that if they can form parks, they can get rid of parks too. That's my question.
But one thing, I feel like, gosh,
So
I would hope y'all
protect
would
it.
see, I would hope y'all would see that we are more committed than ever to parks. You know, we've not, we've loved what has happened in the Greatest Generation Park, but now we've added the Lakeside Park.
which is wonderful.
Which I think which shows you that not only do our citizens love them, and even in a small town with so much green space throughout neighborhoods, we want to set aside stuff, other parks, and we looked at that reservoir out there and say, gosh, it's just too bad that that doesn't have a more public use. And so we did that, and I think we are all in agreement of the importance of parks. And I'm speaking as, you know, city councilman, but I think I wouldn't be saying anything all the rest wouldn't say. I will still say that Greatest Generation Park is one of the best things that's ever happened in Thomaston, and the Lakeside is awesome and going to be a great future for this, you know, the open space and green space of this community. And so I hope you see that we all have the same desire, and we all think that just because this is a small town doesn't mean that we don't need to set aside places that that are special places. So we're all in agreement. I guess one thing, and we could, create another designation and put it in a different color where people would see parks, but it still doesn't remove the process that if some future council and we've started off by saying this, some future council says that, we have an opportunity. Google has decided they want to put a regional headquarters here, and this is the space they've chosen. They've asked that it be rezoned. Well, there'd be the reaction of the community. There'd be, we'd have to say, what is the best space? I can guarantee you everybody then would say, well, what about this space over here? What about this space over here? I think they're just as committed to those things. But I think, the thoughts in this resolution are excellent. But one of the things that I fear that would be inaccurate in here is to say, included a new uniquely designated zoning classification for providing therein regulations to ensure that all public spaces now afforded to the citizenry shall continue unimpaired, uninvaded. I mean, I think even if we presented this resolution, we'd have to change some of that because we can't guarantee, when we say we're going to do something, I want to make sure we can, but I'm not sure that's accurate, that we could say we're going to continue. It might be our hopes and wishes for the future, but I hate to put stuff in writing, to me personally, that I can't guarantee. I realize down the road it wouldn't be me, but I think the thoughts...
Well, it would be dated, and we know we cannot bind another. I think we've rehashed that. That goes to the whole zone. They could come in and say, whoops, let's go out with all that zoning, and we're going to have our whole new zoning classification. So but I know what you mean about words. You need to be careful with words and how words are used. Russell?
Yes, ma'am. And to your Google example, I heard on the radio today that the new, was it Rivet? The new electric? Rivian, the new Rivian plant, the electric vehicle. The state came in and circumvented all the local zoning.
Well,
Just completely undid their land use and said, yeah, this is where it's going. But
Yeah.
Second point, and this leads into a question, right? So the powers enumerated in the Constitution that aren't specified by the Constitution are reserved to the state. Georgia's a home state, home rule state, so the powers that are not enumerated in the state constitution are reserved to local jurisdictions. County, via the Constitution, or the city derives its power through the city charter. So feds, state, city charter. Part of those powers under the city charter are the powers of zoning, right? Things that aren't specifically called out in the charter or the Constitution, but the General Assembly makes laws on, and there's some of them, they allow referendums, right, for the sale of distilled spirits. Local jurisdictions don't have power in some instances, and they leave it up to the people. But in the case of zoning or land use, which is an extension of police powers, those powers are designated to the local government or the elected officials, the mayor and the council. So the question is, do you or do you not trust your local elected officials to provide adequate governance for public parks?
We just saw development pressures come in on this part.
So you don't trust the governing body, so you want to take a mechanism to bind the governing body, which we've already acquiesced we can't do.
We want them accountable.
you aren't binding. You're declaring while you're here, like you're doing with everything else. It's not a special bind. So,
I guess my point, if there's a trust for the elected governing body,
well, is there a statement from the body that, I mean, you just said, Doug, that, that you feel this way about, you value the parks. You know how important they are to the citizenry.
Absolutely.
And I think in the past, we've just heard some remarks being made about development, and it's so easy for development to come in. I think that's the fear. And I'll tell you, if the state understands the importance of parks, I have no doubt. I think it would, I don't know.
Russell, this park committee,
and I'm completely fine denoting, recommending the council, identify this as a park, identify this as the properties identified on the National Register. So that people that are coming to Thomaston, that are reviewing our ordinances, that are looking at our maps, know what our land use is, what our landmarks are, and that's an informational piece. Is kind of a step farther to create a specific land use and tie regulations for a specific piece of property that's held in the government trust, because we don't trust the government.
You know, on the other hand, this is what I was trying to think of. How well would the community respect a business who wanted to come in and plop down on the park? I don't think, I would hope the citizens would be in arms. That why are you coming to our community that we care for and value and do this to us?
And in that situation, I don't see any governing body going counter to the will of the people.
I don't either. I just feel like we're creating something that, I think that every, again, I say, where have we been going? I think we've all shown that we really value the parks and that we're willing to spend more money.
Right.
And willing to ask people like Kyle say, go out there and help us develop this. And I hope that in the case of the new park, the Lakeside Park, that's going to grow further. So I feel like, we are as committed. If somebody came in and said, I want, I just can't imagine them saying, just based on what you said, the Google that comes in and say, I can't imagine them saying, I want your greatest generation. No, I think they're smarter than that. They're not going.
But can you assume, in today's world, do we need to be ready? Yes.
I gotta go, but I just want to make observations because I'm very new at this. I'm also a new resident of Thomaston.
Welcome.
Couple of things. Once you establish a park, it's going to be harder to unestablish it. So the more we get in, the faster we get them in. Again, it's another barrier to development. And as Russell pointed out, to me personally as well, that the government can do whatever, whenever it wants.
Right.
But if we have that designation, which means if we want to trust the government's got to trust us and say, go ahead, mark it, because if I'm going to defend your parks anyway, then I can defend them when they're already, or, put it into an ordinance, whatever it is. And everybody seems to be in agreement to the value of the parks. I think the issue here is how do we do it?
Exactly.
We have to look at the mechanics.
Right.
And that's where we have to trust the government to look at the mechanics and do what's best for us. And not what might happen in 20 years from now, because no one has control over that.
But if you read the ordinances now with P1, have you read them?
No.
Well, you need to.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I thought this was a public meeting, so I'm sorry to crash your party.
No, we're delighted you're here. We're delighted you've
I hope we
moved
get a
here.
dog park.
That's another use. That's another itemized use.
Yeah, my doggy wants a dog park.
Tell us your name.
He's building one.
Yes. What is your name?
Tia.
Tia.
2 eyes.
T-I-I-A. And
Your last
do
name?
you have a last name?
Yes, K-U-N-N-A-P-A-S. It's Estonian, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. Yeah,
Oh.
I know.
Mm.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
I got a question. So let's go back to Russell's idea. What's the process if the parks in the city remain unzoned? So if the developer wants to come in, would they have to come in, they'd have to acquire the property,
It would have to be zoned.
it would have to then be zoned, so they have to come before the Board of Zoning, correct, and request a zoning for that property, and then it have to come before council to finalize that zoning, correct?
Correct.
So that's 3 levels of processes where it could be stopped. So it's not zoned, we're labeled it as park, it had to be acquired from the city, number 1, which more than likely someone would step up and say, hey, we're not going to do this. They'd have to get it zoned, or request zoning from the Board of Zoning, and then have to come before City Council as well.
It might even have to, depending on location, it might even have to go before the Joint Plan Commission and the, City of Thomaston.
I understand that, Taylor, and I've watched it. I've observed how it operates.
I'm just trying to think about multiple levels
Right.
of safeguards.
Right,
because we are trying to protect.
right. We're trying to come up with how do we halt it for a moment, freeze it in time, so that everybody can get their heads around what's happening to our parks. And everybody knows how busy everybody else is. These meetings, they come and they go. The zoning with signage, sometimes it seems to get there, sometimes you don't even see it. I'm just trying to say, how can we say, wait just a minute, you're talking about something important here, and there is a process in place if people are paying attention, but I'm afraid that sometimes it seems to happen too late. It's too late for anybody to react.
I understand your
And that's why if we can come up with some kind of designation or classification that just kind of puts everybody on alert, everybody, not just a few, but everybody on alert.
So how taxing would it be to create an open space or a green space classification under our zoning?
You would just have to define the use.
So permitted use, so that'd be use of recreational, would we need to break it down per park? Because different parks have different eligible uses such as.
I mean, even, let's just say the land use and the zoning, if that were set in stone, if that still couldn't change, that still doesn't define ownership. Like some private entity could buy it essentially and it'd be a private park with just a, that ain't what we want, that's not what we want either, right?
No, I don't think anybody has an interest in selling it. It's kind of trying to foresee the future,
A while back, I guess I've been on this park committee for a while now, and I remember reading about Central Park in New York, and do you know that the developers were nipping at Central Park back in the 30s? They didn't see the value of that whole rectangle for all of those residents. And I understand their challenges with parks, don't get me wrong here. And I appreciate what the city has done and is doing. And I think y'all have done a great job, really. And Kyle, it's wonderful you're here too now. So we've got such wonderful parks. We just need to come up with a way to say, halt just a minute, because it happens in such a hurry. It happens over and over and over. I don't know, Kyle, in like Columbus, if they had any. I know cities are a little different, but they aren't different. I mean, they have their parks, don't they?
They do, and I think they're subject to development. I can do some research and figure out what was there, but just like anything is for sale. You can protect wetlands to the nth degree, but
Right.
the reality is if you have enough money to make wetlands over here or delineate, you can do what you want with enough money. So.
So what if we call it parks, we create a regulation, land use, and we insert that? One is still not going to be binding on the government, it would just be on the people that visit the park.
Well, would the people who visited the park,
That's more of a use, which is contained within your ordinances. But if we say, all right, we're going to have a passive park, right? And we're going to do no roller blades or skateboarding or kayaks or whatever. And then the city wants to have a kayak contest. That's exempt from zoning. Which goes back to who are we protecting it from?
well, I know you can't solve all the questions.
But usage and development's two different things. Usage, roller skating, and it's totally different from having the land, to come get developed.
I guess my point is if I call it a park, I have to define park and I have to define a use because I've assigned a land use. So how do we define that? You can't just call it a park.
Open space, green space, open space for recreation.
How much is green space? 30%, 40%, 100%?
All of it.
It's not 100% now. There's concrete over there. There's tennis courts.
Half, half then.
But that's an arbitrary number. How do I make it based on something that's, legally viable?
I think in a lot of the definitions, they just define a park as, they don't go into that much detail. It's just a general, and what is within the park, like playgrounds, walkways, trails, pavilions.
So we just call it a park, and in the uses we say specified uses as prescribed by City of Thomaston ordinances
Yeah.
for the uses.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So we
Follow
zone
the
as a
ordinance.
park and is subject to our ordinances. I'm fine with that.
Because y'all make up the ordinance.
Jerry, do you have any comment?
Well, as you know, I moved to Thomaston in 2000, and I came straight from Jonesboro down here, Clayton County, and we had exactly the same problem in Clayton County, except that we were being shoulder to shoulder with Fulton County, which was constantly trying to eat us alive, so to speak. And the one catch word that you've used today that we dwelled on up there was green space. And if we could go ahead and carve us out a green space right now, we're ahead of the game in future development. So I like the term green space. It's there, and you can walk among the trees and quote, I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree, because up in Clayton County, that tree wouldn't be there tomorrow. It would be a taco stand or heaven knows what. So we sort of had to fight a very strong battle just to preserve the green spaces we had in Clayton County. This one here is laid out for us. And what I'm hearing you say is we're going to develop an ordinance that preserves that green space henceforth and forever. So that's my cut at it, is take do it while you can.
Right.
Because it gets harder every day. And the reason it gets harder is because money don't flow out. And so they don't care what your historic value is or whether it's a good place to breathe. If they need it to put in as a Google complex, money will talk at some level. So I think it's wonderful that we have an opportunity here to just go ahead and establish our green space as it is.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, Bob is about to speak.
Are there people that run in your municipal circles that y'all go to that are experts at stuff like this, that understand how to write up zoning ordinances concerning parks?
The guy we've been working with for the last year is as good an expert as there is in the whole state, right, Russ?
Could he help us out?
Well,
Sure, I mean,
Well,
we can give a crack at it. But
would a motion be in order for you to form a committee, a subcommittee of this committee with Russell or whoever you so choose to go to this person and explain kind of what our sentiment is and let them come back with something for us? I mean,
well, so let me ask you, we've already got a committee. Do we really need to form yet another committee? Why not just let Russell talk with him
And then could we meet again as a committee, or?
Yeah, we're voting, I think, April 5th. The last public hearing is scheduled for March 22nd. And we will have to have everything drafted prior to that public hearing.
March 22nd, you said, prior to that, or?
That's the final.
Just for clarification, the draft designate as a parks, we'll come up with some use subject to ordinance.
Right.
And
But if the city wants to build a 2,000 kilowatt high transmission electric plant, the zoning is not going to preclude that from happening because we're exempt. Not that we're going to do that, I'm not going to do that, but that's an extremist illustration to it. We can regulate it to death, but if it is a governmental use, the zoning will not trump the governmental use. That's not private use, that's governmental use.
you want me to move the adoption of this ordinance then?
Well, I guess as a start, we could move the adoption of this resolution to present to city council. And in the meantime, be trying to work on,
I can probably have something rough drafted in the middle part of next week, but maybe if you want to meet sometime later next week, I can try to have something in writing.
okay? And then whoever's available, maybe, could meet with you upstairs, or where would you want to meet? Or call a meeting?
Whatever you think y'all want to do.
Or what's easier? I know you've got a lot on your plate.
It doesn't matter. Either one's fine. I mean, I'm up there, I'm down here. It's not that far of a walk, so whatever's best for y'all. And
Could we be kind of on call for another meeting next week?
And I'll brief council
First, isn't it?
Tuesday of the intention of denoting green space or parks on the map and kind of what we got in mind.
Could we, when is that, next week?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday? Could we present the resolution or not?
You could. I don't know that I'll have everything I need done on my end by Tuesday. But
Well, this is just a resolution to present the idea.
it's an
not-
illustration of citizen need and input for this type of designation, right?
Yeah.
This resolution is an illustration of our support that we need to at least denote on the zoning map that
Right,
this current land use is as a park and green space, and we want developers and people that visit our community to understand.
right.
On the back end, we're telling the governmental officials, we
Yes.
understand that this is drafted in no way to bind you or your successors or to bind any current, future, or proposed governmental use of
We
property.
understand that. Yeah.
Under those circumstances, I would say there's no meeting necessary, and I will move that we adopt this resolution.
But then, don't we want to see what it is, or?
I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing, again, I love the sentiments of this. My big problem is what we started off by saying, we can't bind any future.
Well, that's what Russell was
And
just saying.
yeah, I would prefer that we see what Russell comes up with and try to make sure that all this works with that, because the last sentence is the only thing I have a problem with, and I'm just anal about making sure what we put in writing is true. And we start off by saying we can't do something, we can't make something that will continue unabated and impaired, and then we put it in writing and say, let's sign it. And I just think that's not right.
Well, if we date it like it's current and we understand nothing is, and that you can change it at any time.
I mean.
It's to show the importance
Well,
of it.
and I think I guess I would hope y'all know, we all think that's important. We
Yeah.
just built a.
I know, and we know you know that it's important, but what we're trying to say is, let's brace for the future as best we can. It's not going to be perfect. And it shows that this body cares enough, and the city council cares enough
and I
to
sure
make a
do that.
statement that this is what we are after.
But, I mean, initially, my idea was to offer some kind of compromise to where they worked out some of the particulars on this, and then I heard, well, we don't need that, and so I said, well, let's adopt it like she got it. And then I do that, and they say no. So, I don't know where to go.
Why don't I try to have you,
I'm trying to get us through the meeting, you know.
why don't I try to have you before Tuesday night's meeting,
Okay.
something in draft form that kind of says, hey, we're gonna call it Parks Recreation Green Space, PRS, whatever, we create a zone. And then I come up with a narrative that is descriptive on what that zone is. And the intent would be for every park that we have formally named, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we tag that zone. And I email that out prior to the Tuesday night meeting. And if there's issue with it, we try to have a meeting sometime Tuesday before the meeting to work it out.
That
If there's
sounds
no
good.
issue
Sure.
with the proposal, then I just make the pitch to the city council.
Keep it simple.
Okay.
Yes. Agreed.
What do you think? Sounds good.
Only if Dave Pfeiffer doesn't report on
We got a newspaper wrap here too.
it. And the newspaper.
Y'all could say it's a work in progress.
I know I'm just a newspaper person, and I'm trying not to get into this as much as possible, just letting y'all speak, but I do have one question. Russell, this would be a better question for you, I think. As I'm understanding this, the idea is to go ahead and put forth the zoning classification, and then write out the ordinances that will detail that classification. Am I understanding that correctly?
So the zoning in itself is an ordinance, right? It's chapter 98.
Yes.
That chapter ties with land use. There are other ordinances outside of zoning that have certain regulations within zoning, right? Because to modify section 98, which is the police power zoning, that has to comply with the state statute.
Yeah.
All of the other ordinances that live outside of section 98 don't have to follow that state statute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the city council these spatial areas are in current use as city parks. We are going to reflect the current land use on our zoning map to reflect what it is now. But in the regulations section, it will be clear that it's donated as a public park, and then part of it will say in that narrative, shall not preclude governmental functions within designation, and maybe something about, not intended to bind future councils, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the lawyers say, you need to put in there to make it stick. So that way we have a land use, it's reflective of what exists out there on the ground now, and then we have a whole narrative about what that is. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to email it to them, and I'll pitch it to city council.
Sounds good.
And so will it be reflected in the ordinances? Like if you wanted to go on the Google?
Chapter 98.
So if you went on Google or on your city city website and put in the bar, park ordinances.
No, it would be in the zoning ordinance. So like if you go to Muni Code and you go to section 98, that is the entire zoning ordinance of the city of Thomaston. But if you go to our website and go to Muni Code and type in parks, right, it's going to hit all these others, and you would eventually find that. You'd find it in the other ordinances about maybe what times the park closed,
Right.
no solicitation,
Right.
and you'd find your way down to section 98, and you would find that in the zoning ordinance as a land use. You would find that. And I've talked to other citizens and committees. HPC wants something with the National Register. I said, Same type intent, right? We want people that are coming to Thomaston to know that this is on the Historic National Register. So that's not really zoning, because that has nothing to do with land use. That's a different designation. So I can add it on the map. I can show the periphery of what the historic district is, but it doesn't have a specific land use, because for it to have a specific land use, you would have to create an ordinance that threw it under the purview of the HPC, which is an entire other process. So I guess some of it, like the lady said, was the mechanics and the legality of how land use, zoning, and ordinances work. I can call out whatever you want, but to give it a land use, it's got to go into Section 98, which is the zoning ordinance, which is what I'm proposing to do for parks.
Okay, well, just for information, someone told me that like an historic overlay gave some type of protection to...
Absolutely it could, right? We could create historic overlays, we could create historic districts, and based on that districting, and there's a whole process for that laid out in the HPC. HPC meets, they do their research, they make a recommendation to the city council, we have some public hearings, people come, they talk, boom, we vote, we have a historic overlay. But what comes with that is land use restrictions that are more restrictive than other land use. So let's say Kyle lives in an R1 zone, right? A single family residential. And I live in an R1 zone, single family residential. But I create a historic overlay over Kyle's property. Kyle now has to succumb to the more stringent regulations that are in that particular ordinance that governs that overlay.
Okay, well, what about open space overlay?
I don't know why you would do an overlay if you're going to zone it out anyway. Right, we're going to create a land use. That's better than an overlay.
Okay, so you have the...
Overlay, so zoning's land use, and then your overlays kind of go on top of that via ordinances that are somewhere else. And normally they fall within your building and development regulations. It creates more stringent setbacks. It creates more... Okay, I got
you.
More trees and stuff. But that doesn't fit in zoning.
Okay.
That's an overlay that you put on top of it.
Okay, and that might be something in the future maybe, or so, I don't know. No? Do people ever do that for open space?
Well, most open space is going to be...
Green space, open space,
or
yeah.
you know, if the city owns it, there's no real point in an overlay. I can see an overlay like if there's a residential development going down the Flint River.
Yeah.
Right, and we want to preserve some sort of natural buffer outside of the EPD buffer. I would create that overlay down the Flint River, which would prevent certain type of activities with certain setbacks to the river.
Yeah.
And anybody who lived in that overlay would have to conform to that because we want to preserve the integrity of that.
Good,
that land use.
Right.
Or 19 corridor, right? We have an overlay for 19 corridor. Most of them are gateway overlays.
Right, which we've got.
People come in, you want more trees, you might want farther setbacks, you might want different sign height regulations.
It's already out there, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
it is. We already have it.
Right. That's great. Well, so Russell, if I go on and I put in park ordinance, you say it would pop up that it's on the zoning.
Not now.
No, but I mean, if you do that.
Yeah, if you go to Municode, whatever the key word is, just
Yeah.
put park.
And wherever the park is designated, then, and then there's going to be some in there about park usage, right?
I don't know that if we have those as ordinances.
I just noticed that Canton did that.
Those are more administrative policies because those are fluid, right?
Right.
So in the summertime, my parks may be open later than they are in the winter, depending on the sun. So I don't write that in the ordinance.
Right.
So those are more administrative.
I think a lot of them that they put in there were more on behavior.
You could, but if it's written into an ordinance, it does limit the administrative ability to curtail it. Meaning if I say, all right, park's gonna be open until 10 o'clock PM.
I've got that, yeah.
And I have 3 shootings and 2 stabbings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's in the ordinance, park's open at 10. If it's an administrative decision, I say, Kyle, go turn the lights off, lock the gates, we're shutting it at 5 PM. So I'm bound by the ordinance too from an administrative
Right,
standpoint.
right.
We treat the operation of the park is more under the purview of the city manager and his administrative function.
Okay, I just noted that they did that. And I'm sure all communities are different.
There could be some things you put in there, right?
Yeah.
Like if council, and one that I would recommend is say, all right, we're gonna create an ordinance that says no fishing in the reservoir. So right now, if I don't have an ordinance, I go out there and they're charged with trespassing. Well, if I had a no fishing in the reservoir ordinance and the council says it's $250 fine, that gives me another means to regulate a particular act that we're trying to curb.
Okay.
And one thing I'd like to just be on the record and say is if it gives you any comfort, I can just say that I don't think you would find one member on the city council that isn't very interested in providing for the future of this community. We've got a master plan. If you look at our DDA committee, more involved than ever as to saying, what do we want this community to look like? And every one of them, I would just know, fully believes that part of every thriving community and community that that provides things that are important to people's way of life know that green spaces and parks are an absolutely integral part of those communities. We all believe that. I can't imagine ever a council that won't think like that, that knows that if we're to have a beautiful community, a community that we want to draw people into. Somebody said, well, it won't be as big in Thomaston because y'all are small, y'all got a lot of green space. No, it is important. And we continue to add parks like Lakeside Park. But I would say, I feel like I'm just say that's how I feel, and I feel the rest of them all feel like that we believe that that's an integral part of this community.
Well, that's wonderful.
And how to maintain them and how to make them better.
And I applaud you, and I'm very grateful that you feel that way, and you're speaking for the other members too, and they do seem, I mean, you've done so much already. So I guess it just gets back to that, we know how fast development can occur and how enticing some things can be when the figures get really up there. And we just like to have, and this might be the solution, to put it in the zoning and have the park, just to have something visible to know that this is important to this community and it's in writing. So I think that's the main concern here, I think. But I do applaud you, and I think it's wonderful that right now we have it. But if anything we can do to show in the future that we value this, it will be a statement now that we value this, and it is recognized as parks and recreation.
I'd like to add, I like the idea of having the parks designation versus the green space. Because if you're trying to define and set parameters around green space, that's going to limit us in any projects, like the Hilltop project. That would, if it were very strict green space, that would be a no-go. So I like to know that we would provide green spaces within our parks, but we're not identifying it as just green space, because that will shut down a lot of projects.
And I agree.
Could you hear that, Jerry?
Beth,
Could you hear that?
I didn't get the full gist of it.
No. Yeah, Kyle was just saying, it's more understandable if the language is stated in parks and recreation rather than just broadly as green space.
But because, Jerry, one of the most important next steps in the Greatest Generation Park is this memorial. And it might not be considered wholly green space, you know, so.
Well, what is resonating in my mind is that some of the federal regulations are referred to it as green space. In other words, semantically, green space sort of is a catchword that they use in the federal designations of things like that. So that if we can get by with whatever, it's okay with me.
And I guess we could always sneak it in there, parks with green space.
Right. That might work.
Just as an illustration, if we did zone it as green space, and then council says, Kyle, I want you to go turn it into a parking lot, all 46 acres.
They have the right.
They can still do that because that's a governmental use.
Oh,
As long as it's a governmental use,
Exempt from zoning.
it's exempt from zoning.
so parks would be better. I mean,
Kyle, go cut all the trees down. Pave it. That's a governmental use, exempt from zoning.
I think the green space just covers non-commercial.
non-commercial. Right. Well, we have faith here, and we are looking forward to seeing it I mean, that would be it. That would show, I think, anybody looking at the map or from outside coming in, it would be clear right away what the parks are and how much they mean to all of us. So that would be great. Well, thank you. Anybody else want to say anything? Anybody else? Okay, Jerry, we're signing off.
Okay.
Well, actually, we did have, I know the meeting has gone on so long, it's already 2:30.
In the privacy of my own home, it's been a very pleasurable meeting.
Well, I'm so glad. We have on other business, Russell, Kyle, I mean,
So
give us an update on the
general
memorial.
update, without getting too far
Right.
into the weeds, is I think we've got 95% on the plans, and we're going through the pre-qualifications for the contractors, and I think we've got 4 that have applied for that review. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll make a selection, we'll make a selection on the contractor who's pre-qualified, the list of pre-qualified by March the 4th.
March
And
the
then it'll go out for bid March the 7th through April the 4th, and we'll award in April or May. So we should begin construction hopefully in May or June.
Great. So April or May,
Award.
begin construction, hopefully.
We'll award the contract in April or May.
Award the contract.
Mhm.
Right, okay. Okay, wonderful. And I think all of the questions that were raised in the minutes about the park to Dale were all answered, isn't that right? Did y'all review those? I think they were all answered.
Yes, we got the fence around the water tower and the utilities, the satellites for that, or what are they? The antennas on our water tower.
Right.
They're fine with the new fencing and access and that's
Great. And I know when I spoke with the mayor, he said that he had gotten a photo from someone of a car driving in the park. Oh,
Yeah.
on one of the trails. Have y'all
We've
seen
had-
that?
We've had a few of them, yeah.
There's a citizen with dementia that lives 2 streets behind the park, and the police are well aware. He drives through the park, and we call him, they come visit him, and it repeats itself, so we're trying to,
Aware of it.
yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that needs to be, I know,
Yeah, I
Taylor?
just want to kind of let you guys know, and I'll speak real quick. So, 2 things. First, we'll talk about the Art and Soul Festival. I think I gave you this flyer right here. In reference to the park, we will be using it on the 23rd of April. We're going to be doing an arts and crafts vendor fair down to the Pine Thicket. We'll have some chalk artists out there, have some food trucks, maybe have some local performers like Armstrong School of Dance, maybe our local choirs performing out there. We're going to have some demonstration areas, so maybe some woodworkers over here, plein air artists, our metal artists could be out there welding. Miss Marianne Hughes and her Pottery Guild are going to be out there. You can actually try your hand at making pottery. Try one of the wheels. So some interactive stuff, some kids zone. I met with the Green Thumb Garden Club, and they're going to be doing a booth, trying to get involvement. So if you have any cool ideas that you want to do to just bring kids out and have them enjoy the park, please let them know. So we're super excited about this. On the other hand, the 24th, we're looking to reveal new downtown murals. So all of these murals in question have been in downtown Thomaston at one time. I worked with Jameson to get pictures from the archives of some of these murals. I think over time, we've lost a lot of our authentic, unique character in downtown Thomaston. And it's simple things like RC Cola and Coke. They were both staples in the city of Thomaston. They had plants in the city of Thomaston. So I think it's great for us to kind of pay homage to, their history here. And luckily for us, I found this Color the World Bright. It's a group of UGA students. And so this is what they do. They come in, they recreate these nostalgic murals for a nice discount. So to do all 3 of these, it'd only be $11,000 for all 3 murals. And I believe we spend between $20,000 and $25,000 on the side of English's Cafe. So I think it's to give you some funds. I am looking for sponsors to help make this possible. I've got a little fund set aside, but would love to have some community support because this is something we're trying to do to bring life and prosperity back into downtown as we try to help push the vision of just cleaning downtown and making this a hub for community and where people want to come and spend time together and enjoy Thomaston.
Great. Well, you're doing a great job, and I think this would be a real asset.
I
Thank
appreciate
you
that.
for all your work.
Yes, ma'am, of course. I love it just as much as y'all do.
I know you do. That makes it special.
Thank y'all.
You can tell. Okay, did anybody else have any? Okay, then the meeting will be adjourned.
You actually need a motion.
Okay, a motion and a
I'll make a
second.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Ah,
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. You've been very patient.
okay.
It's
I want to make sure we got
Sits on the right.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Doug. He had COVID a year ago, and one of the reasons